The sound of the glass shattering echoed like a muffled gunshot. Hot coffee spilled slowly across the floor until it reached Daryl's filthy boots. He looked down, then looked at her. Emily wasn't shaking, but her fingers were clenched so tightly that her knuckles had turned white. The tray still hung from one of her hands. No one moved. No one breathed. The whole diner had frozen in that single moment. And then came the smack, his palm hitting her face. Not a real slap, but that mocking kind of tap meant to belittle. The kind that says, "You're nothing." Emily didn't flinch, but her eyes were on fire. He smiled, a short, venomous grin. She knew exactly what that gesture was trying to provoke. What she didn't know yet was how the entire town would remember this day, all because of the choice she was about to make. 3 days earlier, Lancaster Hills looked like one of those towns stuck in time. Wide streets, porches on every house, people who knew each other by name and even greeted the stray dogs. Emily Keller was one of them, but she wasn't just anyone. At a glance, she looked like a regular girl. Brown hair tied up in a loose bun, a snug white t-shirt tucked into a faded pair of jeans under a diner apron. But those who knew, they knew she was the granddaughter of the legendary John Keller, the old military man who had become a local legend, known far and wide for his discipline, courage, and the countless students he trained in self-defense. The kind of man who spoke little, stared deep, and left behind words that felt like they were carved into your soul. Respect is earned in silence. Only those who control their own strength deserve to use it. Emily had been raised by him since she was 7. Her mother, missing. Her father, a name no one ever spoke. Her grandfather stepped in for everything, her schooling, her training, her life. And he didn't do it out of duty. He did it out of love. Their bond was something you couldn't quite explain. Part mentor and student, part grandfather and granddaughter, part father and daughter. All of it at once. Every morning before her shift at the diner, she trained in the backyard. Krav Maga, jiu-jitsu, breathwork, focus, sweat before sunrise. Then the apron went on, the smile came out, and her eyes scanned every inch of the counter at Keller's diner. The diner was the town's go-to place. Truckers, retired couples, high school kids, local veterans. It was a safe spot, or at least it used to be, until they walked in. 3 guys, early 20s, baggy clothes, flashy chains, loud voices. Daryl, Brent, and Logan. Everyone in town knew their names. Bar fights, graffiti, prank videos on social media that always went too far. They had money, but no character. And that day, they picked Keller's. Not because they were hungry, but because they were looking for trouble. Emily saw them coming. She felt it before she even saw them. That weird silence. The creak of heavy boots on the old floorboards. They sat at the most central table, the one that was always left empty. A place of spotlight, a place of challenge. She walked over with her notepad in hand, polite as always, posture straight, no smile. "What can I get you?" Brent was the first to speak. "Think I'll have what's not on the menu." Logan followed up with a look that scanned her from head to toe, like he was sizing up merchandise. Emily said nothing. She made a point of not reacting. She wrote down, "Coffee, onion rings, double burger," turned on her heel, and walked away. The silence returned, heavy like a storm cloud. But inside she knew the test had begun, and sooner or later, someone was going to cross a line. In the back of the diner, old man Keller watched everything through the gap in his office curtain. He didn't say a word, but he didn't take his eyes off his granddaughter either. He knew. He had trained her for a day like this. But now it would be up to her to decide how to use everything she had learned. Daryl stood up and walked to the counter. Emily turned to him, tray already in hand. He held out a $20 bill between his fingers, letting his hand accidentally brush against her arm. She stepped back. And then the accident happened. A light bump, a fake stumble, and the glass dropped. Hot coffee, shards on the floor, and the humiliation, carefully staged, was now a perfect trap. That was the moment when everything stopped. And now we're back in the present. Back to the smack, the mocking laugh, the tap that didn't hurt, but said everything. Emily didn't move, but anyone who knew her could see it. That look in her eyes wouldn't end in silence. If you also believe real strength comes from restraint and self-control, hit that subscribe button. This story is far from over, and what comes next might just surprise you. Emily stepped away from Daryl, still holding the tray. She didn't say a word, didn't react. She walked toward the kitchen with measured steps, even as her heart pounded like a drum. Every customer in that diner knew something had just crossed an invisible line. But no one got up. No one stepped in. Because that's how it always goes. When humiliation is subtle, when violence hides behind a joke, people hesitate. Emily knew that. She'd seen that kind of silence before. The silence that pretends not to notice, just to avoid getting involved. But Old Man Keller didn't pretend. He was standing at the end of the hallway when she passed by. She didn't even see him. She just heard his voice. Steady, low, but with a weight that cut through any wall. "You okay?" She stopped, still facing away. Closed her eyes for a second, then answered, "I'm still deciding." He didn't say anything else. Just watched her walk into the kitchen, take off her apron, wash her hands, and breathe deep in front of the smudged mirror. She stared at her reflection like she was searching for a version of herself that wasn't there. She remembered those mornings in the backyard, muffled screams into the pillow after a failed drill. The times her grandfather corrected her stance, not with scolding, but with patience. The fight isn't about showing strength, it's about finding balance. And in that moment, balance was the last thing she felt. She felt hurt. More than that, she felt abandoned in the face of cowardice. Even so, she didn't cry. She swallowed the lump in her throat and returned to the dining area. The guys were gone. They'd left a crumpled 20 on the table, and with it, a napkin with a phone number scribbled on it. Emily grabbed both, tossed them in the trash without a second thought, cleaned the table, and worked her shift to the end. When the last customers left and the lights began to dim, her grandfather was already waiting outside, leaning against the old pickup he had restored decades ago. The sky was clear and full of stars, but she knew he wasn't just there to give her a ride. "You held back," he said as he opened the door for her. Emily got in without a word. The engine rumbled to life, low and steady, matching the tone of the night. They drove in silence for a few minutes. Then she broke it. "They think everything's just a game." The old man nodded, eyes fixed on the dark road ahead. "Because they've never come up against someone who plays by different rules." She looked out the window. The world outside felt like a different place. Houses darkened, dogs roaming the streets, headlights cutting through the dust on the road. If I had fought back right then and there, in front of everyone, would it have been worse? "Maybe," he replied. "Or maybe you would have just given them exactly what they were looking for." Emily squinted. That stung more than the slap. "So what do I do now?" He didn't answer right away. He parked the truck in front of their house, shut off the engine, and looked at her with the calm of someone who's seen real wars. "Now you train." The next morning, before the sun touched the rooftops, they were already in the backyard. The ground was still wet with dew, the air sharp and cold. Emily's hands were wrapped, feet planted firm. Her grandfather stood in front of her like a boulder. No words of comfort, no speech, just one sentence. "Control isn't weakness, it's mastery." And the training began. Sequence after sequence, fall after fall, strike after strike. No crowd, no likes, no applause. Just sweat, just effort, just pain. The kind that builds, the kind that purifies. Emily fell, and got up, fell again, got up faster. Her grandfather watched every detail, adjusted her hip placement, the angle of her elbow, the focus in her eyes. "Again," he'd say, "always again." Hours later, she was on her knees, breathing heavily, hair plastered to her forehead. Her grandfather knelt in front of her. "They saw a waitress, but that's not who you are. You are what you do when no one's watching. You are what you hold inside when everyone else wants to see you explode." Emily stood up slowly, not out of rage, with clarity. She understood now. But at that exact moment, a black car cruised through town with the windows down and those same three guys laughing out loud. Their plan wasn't over. In fact, it was just getting started. On Monday, at exactly 10:30 in the morning, the diner's door chime rang again. Emily was pouring coffee for the retired sheriff in the corner booth when she heard the metallic sound. She didn't need to turn around to know who it was. The tone of the laughter, the footsteps landing hard on the floor, the clinking of metal in their pockets. Daryl, Brent, and Logan had come back, as if nothing had happened, as if they hadn't left behind a stain of shame. But this time, the game was different. They didn't walk in provoking anyone, no cheap jokes. They took their seats with stiff, forced smiles and lowered voices, pretending to be on their best behavior. Daryl even took off his cap before sitting down. Emily approached them with her notepad, like always. But inside, every step was deliberate. Her eyes were steady, without hostility. Her calm wasn't a mask. It was armor. Before she could speak, Logan spoke up. "We wanted to say we're sorry for the other day." Brent nodded awkwardly, like someone following a script. "We crossed the line," he added. Emily didn't respond right away. She just watched them. Wrote down the order for milkshakes and fries. No small talk. Turned around and walked back to the counter. In the back of the diner, the silence at the tables felt different. It wasn't avoidance anymore. It was alertness. The same customers who had looked down just days ago now lifted their heads, quietly. Something had changed. The waitress who had stood her ground in silence wasn't the same. And the town, without needing words, sensed it. Old Man Keller came through the back door a little later. He didn't say a word, just looked at his granddaughter with that mix of pride and watchfulness. She noticed, but she didn't lose focus. While the guys ate, Emily noticed something. They were testing her again. But this time, it was more subtle. Daryl started making small talk about martial arts, asking questions like he was just curious, but with that tone that always held something else. "Does your grandpa still train people?" he asked, with a smile that felt way too friendly. "No," she answered coolly but polite. "He only trains people who learn to respect themselves first." The line dropped like a stone in water. It rippled out, but no one responded directly. Only Logan let out a crooked grin and said, "Dang, that was a little harsh." Brent pretended to be on his phone. Daryl shifted in his seat and stared out the window. The meal went on, and even though everything seemed normal on the surface, there was something in the air, a quiet tension. Emily could feel it. So could her grandfather. When the trio left, they left behind a generous tip, a folded $50 bill. Emily didn't touch it, just watched it, like someone who can see past the act. That night, John Keller sat with her on the porch, both of them holding steaming mugs of tea. The silence between them had always been easy, but this time, he was the first to speak. Sometimes, the enemy shows up dressed as someone sorry. Emily kept her eyes on the streetlights, thought about the words, thought about Daryl's eyes, which didn't show any real regret, thought about Logan's smug smile, about Brent's eyes, darting around like he didn't know where to hide. "I know," she replied. Her grandfather studied her for a moment, then asked, "So what are you going to do?" She looked at him, not like a granddaughter asking for approval, but like someone who knew exactly what needed to be done. "Get ready, but on my own terms." And that's exactly what she did. Over the next few days, Emily trained by herself, in the shed out back, among punching bags, ropes, and cracked mirrors. She knew she didn't need to beat anyone. She just needed to be ready, because the next move wouldn't come inside the diner. Meanwhile, the town watched. No one said anything, no one judged, but they noticed every move. People started greeting her with more confidence. A few men started calling her Miss Keller, with a new tone of respect in their voices. Even the retired sheriff left a flower on the counter. Small gestures, quiet affirmations that something in her had shifted, and everyone could see it. But across town, something else was brewing. A video, a challenge. And Emily had no idea her image was already making the rounds in a private group chat, alongside mocking comments. "Let's see how far the tatami princess's bravery really goes." By Wednesday morning, Emily's name was already on the lips of nearly every young person in town, not because of something she said, but because of something she never gave permission for. The video had been recorded in secret, a 2-minute clip, muted, showing Emily landing a rapid-fire sequence of punches and kicks on a heavy bag, her face dripping with sweat, her fists lightening fast, her eyes locked in. The video wasn't about self-defense. It had been edited with mocking captions, laughing emojis, fast-paced music, and the title, "Ninja Waitress?" Or just thirsty for attention? What had once been quiet admiration was now turning into gossip. People who had only watched from the sidelines were suddenly full of opinions. Oh, now I get why she stayed quiet that day. She was just waiting for an audience. Another one chasing likes. People talked more, judged more, knew less. Emily saw the video during a break in her shift when a coworker showed it on her phone, laughing without malice. "Girl, this thing's going viral." Emily simply delivered the order to table 5 and moved on. But inside, she felt it. Not anger, not shame, but that particular kind of pain only felt by someone betrayed by their own courage. She hadn't done that training to prove anything, and now it was being turned into a spectacle. At the end of the day, Old Man Keller was waiting in the backyard with his arms crossed. "I saw the video," he said, no drama in his voice. Emily slowly took off her apron. Her shirt still clung to her from the heat of the stove. "I didn't post anything. I know, but that doesn't matter anymore. What matters is, what are you going to do about it?" She didn't answer, just sat on the wooden bench under the tree where she used to tie ropes for training. Her eyes dropped to the ground. "I'm tired, Grandpa. They turn everything into a joke, even the serious stuff." The old man sat beside her. Let the silence settle in for a few seconds. "You know why they do it?" She shrugged. "Because they're bored?" He smiled, but not really. Because they're scared. And when someone's afraid of what they don't understand, they try to make it look ridiculous. Emily looked up. For the first time, she seemed to be searching for an answer she couldn't find within herself. "So what? I just stay quiet?" Keller took a deep breath. "You stay steady, because steadiness is more frightening than a quick comeback. And your steadiness, it's already starting to change things." The next morning, the boys came back. But this time, they didn't come in. They stayed outside, parked in their black pickup. Speakers blaring, loud music, mocking voices imitating martial arts moves. Logan was swinging his arms in over-the-top gestures like a character in a cheap action flick. Brent was filming the whole thing. Daryl sat behind the wheel just watching. They were trying to provoke her, force a reaction, capture a new moment to upload. But Emily didn't bite. She kept serving customers, smiling at kids, taking orders with composure. Every time the horn blared outside, she stayed in rhythm. Every mocking shout was met with graceful indifference. But it wasn't passivity. It was control. What her grandfather called invisible strength. The kind you don't need to show, because people can feel it. At the end of her shift, with the truck's headlights still pointed from across the street, Emily walked out the back door. She headed to the training shed, tied up her hair, strapped on her wrist guards, and began. Each kick had rhythm. Each strike carried more than technique. It carried purpose. She wasn't training just for herself anymore. Now it was about something bigger, about how to stand firm against disrespect without becoming like the one who dishes it out, about turning humiliation into readiness, about quieting the noise with balance. But while she trained, something was happening in town. The video of the boys mocking Emily was being shared. But this time, the comments weren't laughing. They were supportive. People were starting to see the line they'd crossed. People who already knew her story. People who, for the first time, felt ashamed for not speaking up that first day. Things were shifting, and no one expected the change to happen so fast. Least of all the boys themselves. By Friday morning, they decided to walk in, for the last time. And this time, they didn't come alone. It was Friday, late afternoon. The diner was starting to fill up. Families, couples, retirees with newspapers folded under one arm, kids with wide eyes glued to colorful milkshakes. Everything seemed normal, but it wasn't. People knew. They could feel it. The whole town had already seen the videos, had already heard the whispers, had already taken a side, even if in silence. Emily was at the counter, clearing dishes, when the doors burst open with a bang no one expected. Daryl, Brent, and Logan walked in, but this time, with cameras. Logan was holding a phone, already recording, the lens pointed at Emily from the moment they entered. Daryl stepped in front, with the same smug smile as always, only now more exaggerated, more rehearsed. Brent followed, snickering quietly, like he already saw another viral video in the making. They weren't there just to provoke. They were there to expose To win the image game, they couldn't win in real life. "What's up, champ?" Daryl said loudly, drawing all eyes to him. "Came for an autograph? Or maybe a quick self-defense lesson?" Voices fell silent. Cups clinked back onto tables. The retired sheriff's fork hovered mid-air, frozen. Emily didn't answer, didn't look up. She kept drying a glass with a white cloth, as if the noise was just background static. The whole town waited for what would come next. Daryl stepped closer. "The camera's still recording. We just want to have a little chat, show folks who our local hero really is." Emily slowly set the glass down on the counter, took the cloth off her shoulder, calmly walked around the bar, slow steps, stopped just a few feet from the three of them. Her eyes locked on Daryl's face. The camera trembled slightly in Logan's hand. "This what you want to show?" she asked, calm but firm. "A girl getting harassed at her workplace?" Daryl let out a dry laugh. "Chill, it's just a joke. The internet eats this stuff up." Emily looked around. Every set of eyes was on her. But unlike that first day, now there was support, solidarity, trust. So she did something no one expected. She reached out her hand toward Daryl. "Give me the phone." He laughed again. "What, you gonna teach me a move?" Her hand stayed out. No anger, no sarcasm, just steady. "Give me the phone." For reasons he didn't even understand, Daryl handed it over. Her fingers took the device gently. Emily turned the camera to face herself, looked straight into the lens. "My name is Emily Keller, and I'm not here to fight anyone. I'm not here to entertain. I'm here to do my job with dignity, like every person deserves. If you think that's weakness, maybe you don't know what real strength is." She paused the video, handed the phone back, and said simply, "You can go now." The boys stood there 2 seconds longer than they should have. Daryl had no comeback. Brent didn't know where to look. Logan lowered the phone, and one by one they left. No shouting, no threats, no scene. Just the sound of their boots on the floor, much softer than when they came in. As soon as the door shut, one customer began to clap, then another, and another. Soon the entire diner was applauding, quietly, like people who understood they hadn't just witnessed a moment, but a shift. A statement that taught more than any physical fight ever could. That night, Emily closed the diner alongside her grandfather. They swept the floors in silence like they always did. But this time, the air felt different. "You didn't use a single move," he said, smiling just a little. Emily replied without looking at him. "I used the hardest one of all, keeping control." He nodded, and for the first time, since all of this began, he said something she'd never heard from him before. "Today you surpassed me." The next day, no one talked about the video, because the video was never posted. The three boys left town a few days later. Some say Logan disappeared from social media, Brent started training at a local gym, and Daryl, well, no one's seen Daryl since. Emily kept working at the diner, kept training in the mornings, kept doing what she always did. But now, the town looked at her differently. Not as the pretty girl who served coffee, but as someone who carried something rare, the courage to win without hurting, to stand her ground without striking back. If this story moved you, share it. Leave a comment about what impacted you most, and check out the next video coming up on your screen. And you? What would you have done in her place? Tell us in the comments below.